What's up guys, welcome to the very first tutorial of SvelteKit. Okay, so I got so many comments and even mails to create a course on SvelteKit. Please. So on your demand, here it is. We'll start from the basics concept of SvelteKit and head towards to advanced projects like creating a blog or web applications. Alright then, so first of all, what is SvelteKit? Well, basically SvelteKit is a framework for building websites with Svelte. And by the way, if you don't already know what Svelte is, then just watch this whole video and I'll tell you how you can learn Svelte in just 1 to 2 hours. And then you can easily follow along with this series as well. But in a nutshell, Svelte is a front-end JavaScript library for creating and managing user interfaces similar to React and Vue. Now SvelteKit builds on top of that and provides us with a framework to create a more full-stack website with routing, server-side rendering, and API, so on and so far. Now before, when SvelteKit was created, the way we did this was by using a framework called Swapper. So SvelteKit is like the updated, upgraded and more unified version of Swapper. So SvelteKit is to Svelte is what Next.js to React or what Next.js is to Vue. So whereas Svelte itself focuses just on the client-side rendering and the updating of the UI in the browser, just like React or Vue, instead SvelteKit adopts a combination of server-side rendering and client-side rendering to build really quick high-performance dynamic websites similar to how Next and Next work with React and Vue. Now there's a few benefits of using SvelteKit to build a website rather than just using Svelte on its own. First, like I already mentioned, it utilizes server-side rendering as well as client-side rendering in the browser. And that means that our initial request to the server for the website returns a fully rendered HTML page. And that in turn is better for SEO because it allows crawler to read the full page content. Second, SvelteKit comes with a routing system fully baked into it, making it really easy to set up multiple pages and routes. Third, it allows us to build a custom API for the backend which we can hit from the front end of the website. And finally, it uses something called code splitting to only serve the code that we need at any moment in time, making the page response times quicker. Aside from those, there's also a few extra nice features such as prefetching and layouts that we are going to take a look at later on as well. So these are all things you would expect from a modern web framework, and they are similar features to other frameworks that I mentioned like Next and Next. Now when you work with something like React or Vue or Svelte to create a web app, the final product that's created is what's known as a single page application, or SPA for short. That means that only one HTML page is ever sent to the browser, and it would be a blank HTML page with no content on it whatsoever. And then inside the browser, Svelte or whatever else you are using renders components and content so that we can see them. So all the rendering of components is done only in the browser of the clients. But when we work with SvelteKit, we have a combination of client-side rendering in the browser and also server-side rendering as well. So when we make an initial request to the server, instead of it sending back a blank HTML page, it sends back a pre-rendered HTML page fully built. So in this case, the initial rendering is done on the server and not in the browser. And that is much better for site crawlers and search engines. So our HTML page that arrives in the browser is already full of content. And then from that point onwards, our application behaves more like a single page application. When we navigate around to different pages on the site, we don't send extra requests for extra HTML pages. Instead, Svelte intercepts requests to new pages. So SvelteKit basically takes the idea of a single page application and enhances it to include server-side rendering and a routing system to load in different page components. And again, SvelteKit also allows us to build a custom API for any server-side logic that we can then interact with from the front end of our application. Now in addition to all of that, SvelteKit's built on top of something called Vite, which is front-end tool that builds our code and pulls it all into the browser. And it also provides us with a development server with hot module replacement. And that essentially means that we'll get live updates in the browser when we are changing our code and previewing it. So in this series, then you are going to learn all the basics of SvelteKit first of all. And then we are going to build a simple website called Anime Shows Review with a few different pages. So that, my friends, that's your introduction to SvelteKit. Next up, we are going to create a brand new SvelteKit application. So what's up guys, so welcome to the second tutorial of SvelteKit. But before we start this tutorial, I want to tell you something, that I have merged all the 34 videos of Svelte framework series so you can complete that course in one go. So who doesn't know what the heck Svelte is, go and watch this. How much views you gonna milk from just one course? Work on your another course, so stop it, cats. Okay, so we got amazing support from you guys on the first videos of this series. That video crossed 150 views in a day and we got some subs as well. Alright then, so the easiest way to create a new SvelteKit app is by using this command right here in the docs. npm create svelte at latest. And then give it a name, in this case my app. So before you do this, you will need to install an up-to-date version of the Node.js. So make sure you download Node. Once that's done, open up a terminal and navigate to the directory that you want to create this project in. And then type out that command that we just saw, npm create svelte at latest. And then whatever you want to call your application. So I'm going to call it anime-shows. And then hit enter to create it. Now after a second, it's going to ask you if you want to generate a starter demo project which comes with a ton of boilerplate code, components and routes. Or if you want to start with a blank skeleton project which comes baked with just the bare bones. So this is the option that we are going to choose. Well, because I want to teach everything from scratch, so hit enter on that. And then this is going to create a blank SvelteKit project for you. Alright, and then when that's done, what I'm going to do is cd into that new project directory. So first of all, cd anime-shows, and before I do anything of this other stuff here, what I'm going to do is open this up in VS Code. So to do that, I'm going to type code and then a dot, then press enter. It's going to open this up in VS Code for us. Well, you don't have to use VS Code if you don't want to. You can use a different editor, but I'm using VS Code. So this right here is our skeleton starter project, and I'm going to walk you through these different folders and files shortly. Alright then, so now then we want to install all the dependencies, and to do that we need to open up a terminal and make sure you are in the root folder of the project down here. In a second, anime shows, and then just type npm install and hit enter. Alright then, so now that's done, we have installed all the dependencies, and now we can walk through these folders and files because at first you have never used SvelteKit before, it can be a little daunting. Now before we do anything, there is a package actually I want to show you, which I would recommend installing for VS Code, and that package is called Svelte for VS Code, this one right here. So just search for it at the top and install this package, and that gives us syntax highlighting for Svelte component, otherwise VS Code might not work without components very well. So install that before you do anything else. Alright then, so let's go through these different files and folders. So first of all, we have the Node modules folder right here. And this Node modules folder is where we install or keep all of our different dependencies. So you know what we just said, npm install, and that installed all the dependencies. Well, that's where all of these live right here in the Node modules folder. And we don't need to go in there, that's just where they are living. Next up, we have a source folder. And this is where all of the magic happens. The source folder is the place you will be writing about 99.9% of your code. You will create file components in here, create routes in here, create API endpoints in here, and you can even write any global CSS in here too. What the... Sorry guys if you heard some kind of music. I didn't put any kind of background music in this video. It's just here's a gym near my place. I didn't get why people goes to gym. Knowledge is much hotter than muscles, guys. Grow up.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Who's gonna rock you when someone let you sleep?
So we were talking about the source folders. So for pretty much all of the course, we will be focusing on this source folder. Inside here, we already have a root folder as well. And that's where we'll be making all of our page components. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later in this course. Also, in this source folder, we have the app.html file. This is the single HTML file that gets served to the browser on any initial request to the server. Inside the HTML file, you are going to see these little special placeholders values. So head and svelte body. These are the places which will render our component on the server. We don't really need to ever edit this HTML file much unless you have a really specific reason to do so. So finally down here we have a static folder which is for any static assets like a fab icon or any static images or media that you need to make public. Now also there will be a bunch of extra files at the end too. A git ignore file which is for version control if you are using git. Our package files for tracking dependencies. A readme file and also a couple of config files too, which we might talk a little bit more about later on. Alright then, so the only thing really left to do now is preview this in a browser to see what it looks like from the off. So I'm going to open up a terminal again, and inside here I'm going to type out npm run dev. Now this is a script found in the package.json file. So let me press enter and it's just going to check a second. And right here, this is the URL. We need to go to preview the site. So I'm going to click that. So this is our starter project. So guys, this is all the index components which we just saw over here inside the source folder inside routes. Alright again, so like I said before, it would benefit you enormously to already have a basic understanding of Svelte before carrying on with this course. And if you want to learn Svelte in detail, then I have got a whole series that's going to teach you all about it from the ground up. So I'm leaving a link to that series down below the video. But I am also going to use this lesson right here to give you a quick overview or refresh it if you like on Svelte's component. If you don't need this, feel free to skip to the next lesson. But for the rest of us, what is component? Well, a component is basically a standalone section of a web page. For example, a navigation bar could be a component, an article on your web page could be a component, or a banner could be a component as well. In SvelteKit, whole pages are represented by components as well. So if you have an about page, we would have an about component to represent that page. And if we have an index page, we would have an index component to represent that page. And that's exactly what we have right here, an index component. Well, this page.svelte file is our index file. You know that, right? So whenever I say index file, I'm talking about this page.svelte file. And this index component inside the routes folder is the component which we will see if we go to the index page of this website. We'll talk about pages and routes a little bit more about later on, but for now I just want to focus on the components themselves. Now Svelte components have to be named something.svelte. That way SvelteKit knows that this is a Svelte component, right? And inside the Svelte component we can essentially have three different things as HTML template, which is the HTML that will be rendered into the browser, a script tag for any interactive JavaScript code for this component or any reactive dynamic values that we want to inject into the template, and finally a style section for any CSS to style the templates. And that's pretty much all of it. At the most basic level now, you don't actually need to have the script tag or a style tag, and a component can just be an HTML template, but most of the time you will find yourself using these other things as well, a script tag and a style tag. So let's take a closer look at this index component and play around with it. So the first thing I'm going to do is just change up this template a little bit. So let me get rid of all that and then we'll do a div, and I'm going to give this a class of index so that I can style it down here. And inside here, and by the way, generally when I have pages and components as pages, what I do is I give each one a class which represents that page. So I can style that page, but you don't have to do that. Anyway, inside here we'll do an h2 with some title, and then down here I'll do a paragraph tag. And then just style this index div a little bit. I'm just going to paste this selector in, and all we see is text aligned to the center, display is block, and margin top is 20 pixels and bottom is 20 pixels as well, also left and right. So basically everything is just going to sit in the middle of the page, center aligned, and it's going to have a bit of margin top and bottom as well. So now let's just save this and preview in the browser. Alright, and there we go, that's all worked. So we have the title and the paragraph, and everything is centrally aligned. And I don't have to refresh the browser to see that changes. It just automatically did it for me when it recognized that we changed the Svelte component and saved the file. Alright then, so what if we wanted to output some kind of dynamic value in the template? As well, for example, we could have a variable up here, which I'm going to name title, and we'll set it equal to one piece review. But if I wanted to output whatever the value of this variable is inside the template, well, we can do that. We can output dynamic values inside curly braces. So curly braces and then the name of the variable, and now we are going to see this one piece review value inside the h2. And we can see that right here. We get the title, which is the value of the variable. Awesome. Now when we use a dynamic value like this title in a template that's coming from up here in the script, whenever this value changes of this variable to something else, then the change will be reflected in the template because it's a reactive value. So it's Svelte to react to the changes in the value. So let's do an example. Imagine we had a function which is then going to change this value. So let me create that function first of all, and I'm going to call it update title. So set it equal to function, and then inside here all we need to do is say okay, we'll take the title and set it equal to enemy is the best. Alright, so now it becomes this new string value. Now that's fair enough, but when do we actually run this function to change the title? Well, if we wanted to, we could run it in reaction to some kind of use event. So I could create a button down here, for example, and that button is going to say change the title. And then if we wanted to add some kind of event listener to this, I can do that by saying on and then a colon and then whatever the event, in this case click, and then we set it equal to something dynamic. So curly braces, now we are setting it equal to something dynamic because we want to pass in a JavaScript function. And that function is update title. So now we don't need to invoke it because that's automatically going to invoke the function. When will the page instead, we just want to pass in a reference. So that when we click the button, it then returns the function. So now when we click on this button, it's going to run this function and it's going to run this code, update the title to be this new value. And when the title updates, that change is going to be reflected in the template. So let's give it a go. Alright, so now we can see this button down here, change the title, and watch the value of this change right here. So this is the initial value of the variable title, right? If we click on this, we run that function and it updates the title variable. And when a variable changes that we use inside the template, then it's reflected in the template as well. Now one more thing I want to quickly show you as well, and that's how to bind values or variables to input fields. So say for example a user wants to type into an input field. Whatever they type into that input field, I'd like to update the title to be that value. So if they type in hello, then the title becomes hello. And then when this changes, obviously that title is going to update down here as well. So let me show you how to do that. How to bind values to inputs, because this is something you will probably do if you have some kind of web form when you are using Svelte or SvelteKit. So let me do an input. First of all, the type is text, and all I need to do is come over here and add a bind attribute and then a column. And then what do we want to bind to? Well, we want to bind to the value of this input. So you know, input fields have value attributes and that controls what's displayed in the input. We are binding to that, and we are going to bind a specific variable to the value attribute so that when the value of the input changes, then the variable will change to match that and vice versa. If I was to change the title by clicking this button, for example, then the value of this input would be updated to match whatever the title is. Alright, so they both stay in sync with each other. So we set this equal to not quotation but curly braces instead, and then whatever the variable we want to bind to. In our case, it's the title. So let's save this and check it out. When we first load the page, we can see that the value already is one piece review. And that's because we have bounded the value of this input to be the value of the title itself. So the initial value of the title, the variable is one piece review. And that value is then showing in the input. So if we change this though, if I delete all, then it's going to be bind back to the title and change the title to be now an empty string. And because that changed, where it's outputting the template, we see an empty string as well. If I change this to hello, then it becomes hello over here. And this still works if I change the title. It's going to update it to anime is the best. And also that changes is reflected down here. Because again, we have bound that variable to the value attribute of the input. Alright, so hopefully those different concepts give you a bit refresher as to how the Svelte components work. So okay, first of all, let me clear something. When I uploaded first video of web development series, then some of you guys was wondering that if I have stopped the SvelteKit series. Then no, it's never gonna happen. We will continue making videos on Svelte till the end of this stupid world. So in this video, I wanted to show quickly how you can pull data in both statically and dynamically with fetch with a new way of doing things in SvelteKit, which is this plus page syntax for each directory route. So this confused me a little bit, but I wanted to share what I learned in case it may help some other people. So our root is this plus page.svelte and a plus page.js. So let's start by returning some data. So what I'm going to do is return this data. So this return is the data. Then you can think of all of the properties in this object as probs. So let's start with just my age, which is 25. And let's put a new line in here. So let's say, what's going on guys? Welcome to the RDH code. And also I am, let's put in just static content 25 years old. Go back to our browser. So here we go. Now let's this data in from the page. So first of all, we'll create our script tag. So export let and then data. Now we want to do is replace 25 with data, which is this object that we are returning. And then let's just say age. Now let's go back to the browser. And there we go. So let's just quickly check it out. Let's say I'm 27. Now check this. And it's working as expected. Well, that's fantastic. Now what if we want to fetch something? Let's fetch some data. So let's destructure fetch as well. And then let's do a fetch request. Let's say const response is equal to await fetch. This is an async function here. So we're going to grab some dummy data. So I'm going to use this right here, which is going to give us 10 users. So let's copy the link address, put that in here, and now let's do a const. Let's just call this user is equal to await response JSON. If you don't know async await syntax, then there's a really great articles on Mozilla's MDN and W3 schools. Others I can kind of break that down for you. But it's a nice syntax for asynchronous code. So now we have users. So let's drop that into this object. Now so let's say users, and then it has the value of users, and then that should be available to us now in this data object. So let's pull the name, email and website of our users. So let's create an h3 in here. Let's say users, and then let's create an unordered list, and then let's do in each users as users. This will be data users, and then let's create our list element, and then let's say user got name. And then this is like really vanilla HTML, but it's okay, we are not trying to do anything fancy. And then let's do the email, and then let's do the website. Just keep it simple. There we go. So it's good to end. The last line should be empty if possible. Now let's see what our page looks like back there. So we have, this kind of dummy data, but we can make it even a little bit more clear here by saying let's wrap it in a strong. So let's say name, and then I'll just copy and paste it so that we can see it here. And again, this is email, then this is website. There we go. Well, that's not much easy to read. There's no formatting here, but the important thing is that we have successfully and simply kind of separated out from that all script module syntax the data calls, which I really like. At first it was a little confusing, but now I think you'll get a sense of how it's nice to structure out your data calls and the same kind of module or components as your route, which is in the same directory. So your data logic can live with your templating. Well, I really hope this helps some of you guys. And hey, if you want to access the Svelte playlist, then click on the playlist on your left. And if you want the full course of Svelte, then click on the right video. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.